Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, the show, celebrates its 40th anniversary this year. 40 years ago, on October 9th, 1984, the first episode of the show premiered, that being the episode Thomas and Gordon. Now, that's a big milestone. I can't believe this show has been around for so long, and I'm glad it does. Thomas the Tank Engine has been so impactful in my life, and means so much to me. I grew up watching it on television and DVDs, and I've been a fan of it ever since. Everything about those classic seasons is so special. From the writing, characters, music, model trains, and more. There was such a clear passion for what was being produced. Britt Allcroft and her team cared so much about the show they were making, and it shows. Thomas wasn't just any kid show. No, it was more. It was something that anyone could get enjoyment out of. It didn't talk down to kids or have morals of the episode in your face. It was subtle, and I really appreciate that. The show also showed how trains work, and the work that's put into operating them. All the moving parts and steam, and the way the trains look is just so good. The trains acted like trains and did what trains do. They didn't see the fact that the characters in Thomas were trains as a limitation. Because the characters are trains, they had to be creative with the writing, and they could showcase how cool trains really are. That's just a few of the many things I love about Thomas the Tank Engine. I could go on all day about everything I love with the show, but there's already so many other people that have done videos on why Thomas is so special and has such a high quality of storytelling. I feel like there's not much more to say that hasn't already been said. Because this is such a special event in the franchise, I decided the best way to celebrate is to make a custom of Thomas. Well, not just any version of Thomas, no. I'm talking about the very first version of the TV series prop, from the pilot episode. Before the first episode of Season 1, there was a pilot of the show with different models than the ones used in the show. As far as we know, there was only a version of Thomas and Gordon, as well as Rolling Stock too. I thought that it would be really cool to make a custom of Thomas from that original pilot episode. Of course, Gordon would have been a cooler choice, but I didn't have a lot of time, and Thomas is the main character after all. My name is Railway, and today we'll be taking a look at my Trackmaster custom of Thomas from the pilot episode. So, to make this custom, it shouldn't be too hard. The only differences between the original Thomas and the finalized Thomas are basically just some paint differences. So, with the design in mind, I started work on the custom. To make this custom, I used a hit toy company, Trackmaster Thomas. Now, I know this is the second version of Thomas I've made now, and I don't even have the regular version completed yet. Don't worry though, I'll get around to making it, as well as the other main cast. First things first, I disassembled the engine and motor. This is so that I can clean it to remove any dirt and dust. As you can see, this Thomas has seen better days, but don't worry, we can fix it. After cleaning the engine and gears for the motor, I realized that the gear on the driving axle was loose. This wasn't going to work as the broken gear would cause the engine to slip. I was going to need a replacement axle. I'm sorry. So, after getting a new axle for the driving wheel, I started to remove the lamp irons and lamp on the front of the engine. This is so that the train can have interchangeable head codes, and also it works as the pilot version of Thomas doesn't even have them anyway. I added some plastic card under the running board where the lamp was and filled it with putty. Once that dried, I sanded it down and it was ready for painting. I used masking tape on the sides of the running board and started to paint it. Until the spray paint I was using decided to stop working. This was the second time this specific brand of paint stopped working. I wouldn't be that upset if I already used most of the paint, but I didn't. This was a brand new can that just stopped working. Okay, so great. Now I don't have any paint to use. But then I thought, well, I can use white paint instead. Like, it isn't what I wanted, but it would make this version of the character a bit more unique, so I decided to roll with it. While that's drying, let's move on to the engine body. I removed the original sticker detail and coal load detail. I decided to use the same blue paint I used for Gordon, as it's the most accurate one I have. Once the paint dried, I started to add the other painted details. I cut out a piece of plastic card in the shape of the wheel arch and then put masking tape on it and put that on the side of the train. I added more masking tape to paint the space in between the water tank and the wheel arch. This actually worked pretty well. I used a very fine tip marker to paint these little spaces on the coal bunker, and also painted the roof as well. The lining on the boiler was painted with the help of masking tape, and the cab windows were made using these stickers and were added to the front and back of the cab. I didn't add the lining on the wheel arch or the cab because Thomas does not have them in the pilot episode. Going back to the chassis of the engine, I painted the smoke box frames and the bottom of the chassis. For the face, I originally wanted to use the one from the RC Trackmaster Thomas, similar to the Rainbow Thomas I made. However, I decided not to and instead used the original face, but with added detail, just so this version is a little more special. After that, I gave the engine a clear coat to protect the paint. Added the coal detail and the decals I made on the sides and back of the train. Finally, the chassis and wheels were reassembled. And with that, the custom was done. Despite the fact that this was a very simple custom to make, it means a lot to me. This custom is special, as it's to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Thomas and Friends, and this show has done so much for me. It was fun to make, and I'm really happy with it. Happy birthday, Thomas the Tank Engine. You've done more for me than you could ever imagine.